Bungalow Bill here. No new craft this time, although I have been working on one, but I decided to shelf it after doing some combat testing. Actually, let's go take a look at it, and I'll give an explanation of why I've benched it. Maybe it'll be demonstrative for me, or maybe it'll be demonstrative for you guys to learn from my mistakes, and for people who have made similar craft in a more successful manner, maybe I can learn from you. So, she isn't done. Obviously, I did some preliminary combat testing, decided that this wasn't an idea of a vehicle that I thought was going to be particularly viable, and stopped building it before it got into the really tedious aesthetic aspects of it, as well as finishing some of the armor. The overall idea was a particle cannon front sider with some lasers that would be predominantly defensive, but also offensive when the defensive lasers aren't being used. Actually, this is even further backwards than the last version I was using. I could load up a more finished one from the autosaves, but I didn't even bother saving it over this file. I did have lasers on the top and bottom from the Thundershock to use offensively. I had a bit of a better pattern built up here. I had the back finished. I had some styling finished over this armor. But I was doing testing, and the problem I was running into was just that these lenses were getting knocked off too easily. I was using this as a fairly short-range brawler because when you set particle cannons in at close range, you can turn down the focus, which just makes them more effective and more efficient weapons. But at the range that I was engaging in, I was having an issue that APS was just way better, and there's no reason not to be using it. This vehicle is a little bit of a panini. It's 3 meters of internals sandwiched by armor, which does put some restrictions on what I can use for engines. The steam turbines were just really convenient, but I could cut these in half and make this vehicle a fair bit smaller if I could get steam engines in the same place. Even using fuel engines and not even fuel injector ones, I could probably bring down the volume a little bit. But ultimately, I tested this against some relatively not great APS ships of the same cost. This cost a little bit over $232,000 when I was combat testing it, maybe $240,000, like the Victoria. And I was just losing these lenses way too early and not dishing out enough damage in return. I'm not completely just going to put the particle cannon idea to bed, but in the future there's sort of one of 2 different ideas that I was thinking about doing is something that might be more viable and leverage the particle cannon's actual strengths. One of those is the Alpha Strike capability, because you can put the charge time way, way up. So from 10 seconds to 30 seconds, I believe will slightly more than triple this value, which is about right. So one of the things you can do with particle cannons is just do a massive alpha strike and just hope you kill the target. That makes for somewhat boring battles because either you win in literally like the first 1/10 of a second or you kind of lose. The other thing I was thinking about doing is going and taking a different lens. So, vertical lens tells me somewhere here, damage loss per 100 meters, 4%, but the long-range lens is only 2%. It does only do 80% of the damage overall, so you have to be above, I think it's a little bit more than a kilometer. I never actually did the actual math, just sort of off the top of my head at some point. So I may do a more long-range craft that uses these instead. And that would leverage the fact that particle cannons are hit scan, and they do not share the laser's weakness of being uncounterable, or of being counterable. So you can't smoke particle cannons, you can't shield them, you can't do anything about the damage, you just take it. And it would be a small craft like this, which is very, very thin, sitting at a long distance and being somewhat evasive, and have smoke, so you couldn't hit it with lasers. Even railguns would be difficult to hit it with. So you could either use your own particle cannon, or just be fast enough to get close to it, use long-range missiles, that sort of thing. So ideally, I could also make it a bit dodgy so that even missiles would have trouble hitting it, especially at that long range, although well-crafted missiles can hit things, at the 2 to 3 kilometer mark that aren't extraordinarily dodgy. But you sacrifice a lot of other things doing that, so there aren't very many missiles in campaign vehicles that can do that sort of thing. Although, at the same time, that strategy may also be very boring, and if you use it in a fleet with other vehicles, wouldn't be great support for them because it wouldn't be bringing very much firepower to the table. And particle cannons, even at their most effective, are not efficient damage dealers as far as the cost of the energy to run them versus the amount of materials that they destroy. So, I don't know. I'll think about it. Particle cannon vehicle may come back. It might not. More recently, over the last day or so, I've been looking more into CIWS because a viewer mentioned flak CIWS to me because it's way, way better than it used to be, and I've been testing that and I've been verifying that, and I've been trying some different turret designs and some different CIWS stuff, so I'll probably do an episode about that at some point, and then the next vehicle will probably be a smaller, either somewhere between a battle cruiser and a heavy cruiser type thing with a lot of CIWS. But we'll see. For now, let's get back into the campaign. So we'll do a quick tactical map update. The Lightning Hoods, after destroying the Candela and then the Quartzstone Fortress, there's nothing left of them, so now it's just capture. I've captured a few tiles in the vicinity of the Gray Talons / Scarlet Dawn area, but there's this big death ball that's piled up onto a Raven's Nest that I have to take care of. One of the issues with it is that if I don't have a lot of volume of my own, I'm going to have to fight one vehicle at a time against all of their vehicles, or a very large portion of their vehicles. So I'm waiting to stack up a few more vehicles in here so that I have closer volumes, and if I have the volume for the battle at something reasonable like 100,000, I can have sort of more reasonable fleets against more reasonable fleets at the same time. Hullbreacher, still repairing. I have to retrofit it as well. I've made some fixes which are up on the Steam Workshop. The CIWS was using the ammo for the casemates. 3 of the 5 CIWS were. There must be some bug or something. The APS is supposed to find the most acceptable ammo for it when you move the ammo with a prefab like I did, and then delete the originals. But it worked for some of the APS and not others. So when I moved the ammo, I checked that the CIWS was still using the right ammo, but I only checked 2 of the guns. I checked one of the big CIWS in the middle and one of the broadside CIWSs, and they're both using the right ammo. The other 3 CIWS guns were not, and I missed that. So we'll be doing a bit of a rotation to take down the Iceberg Logistics Hub. I think there's one more base up here. The Onyx Watch have very little left to them. There's just going to be probably one battle here with Sailfish and then maybe a few other things. It's mostly mopping up for them. And then that should set us up in future episodes to fight the Gray Talon and Scarlet Dawn, although if they begin attacking, we will have fights against them earlier rather than later. If they don't attack, we won't see them until future episodes. We'll be more focused on the Steel Striders and Onyx Watch. I'm not going to make you guys watch this battle. There's a spirit going into a death spiral. Oh, fortunately, it's despawning. Which, at this sort of altitude, even with these high-speed APS shells, I don't have any way of hitting it. This is a very painful fight if you don't have energy weapons. Here we are in a fight against the Steel Striders, where I have a fair advantage here as far as force count is concerned, but one of my two vehicles will not be that effective. We have the Wolin against the Drunken Duck and my Torpedo Bomber, which will probably be doing the main damage here because the Drunken Duck does not have super cavitation based rounds. I'll put up the HUDs that I actually know if I ever hit anything. Torpedo Bomber taking a little bit of damage there. Looks like we just got a hit. So the Drunken Duck can hit because we do have enough detection for it to see. I wasn't actually expecting it to happen though. But it looks like lightning hit the same place twice, and the Wolin is not particularly healthy right now. Really, when I fight submarines, all that I want from them is for them to die quickly. It's, you know, sort of the thing where when I cut my finger, it's a tragedy, but if you fall in a hole and die, it's a comedy. We must have taken out a friend or foe identification there because, oh, never mind, I do have EMP small missiles. That must have been what it was from. I forgot that I had EMP at all, but the Drunken Duck does have small missiles with EMP on them. We didn't really take any more damage. Just that first wave of missiles got a little bit of scarring on the Torpedo Bomber. Looks like it took out one of the blast doors as well. Looks like I found my way into a fight with the Steel Striders. I was trying to be fairly careful about what I actually engaged, so hopefully this will work out fine. We were fighting the Tiger Shark and the Iceberg Logistics Hub with the Hullbreacher. So ideally I want to fight the Tiger Shark first because it does way more damage for the amount of health that it has. I'll try spawning in everything. This may be slow, and it may be a mistake. I also have to put the Hullbreacher... Well, actually, I can spawn in everything I have, so it doesn't matter that much. After this, we'll fight the shore fortifications that have the Liberator cannons and stuff, but if I brought them in here, we'd be fighting at 5 kilometers to them, where they could destroy us, and we couldn't really fight back because we're using cram cannons.
Engaging now.
We may have already had a barrel snipped. Yep, happens fast. It's still shooting though. And hopefully it'll still have enough accuracy. There is a fair amount of barrel inside the turret. Although it looks like with the acceleration of the enemy vehicle, we've missed with our first round of cram cannons, as usually happens. So we're just going to have to take some amount of damage. Hopefully once we've taken out the Tiger Shark, the game will speed up a little bit. Hopefully it also doesn't get too close to us, because that would slow down the game a little bit. Alright, here we go. I don't think it has enough lambs for this many crams, so... Oh, those do not look like good components coming out. I'm pretty sure I saw a lot of GPP. It's AI dead. Looks like the Thunder Shocks are taking a bit of... It says they're Darning Needles, they're actually Thunder Shocks, are taking a bit of anti-aircraft fire. Make sure that we've retargeted. Oh, this is going to get really slow for a little bit while the Tiger Shark despawns. Should speed up after that, though. Iceberg Logistics Hub is not exactly the most offensively terrifying building, but these are just lightweight interceptors, and it looks like we lost an engine. Actually, we lost a lot of things. The Thundershocks are made to tank a fair amount of damage for an interceptor, but that really only works against other interceptors. Their strategy of being kind of slow and tanking damage doesn't work against things that outcost them by this amount. Now, given all the stuff that goes into them, they could very well just be smaller and dodgier and faster and still have the same amount of tankiness, but then they wouldn't be helium vehicles, and that was sort of the fun part about what they are. At least we're getting closer, but we are at 4 kilometers, which is not a particularly effective cram range, and I think our other Thundershock is going to go down soon, so we may have a long wait while we close. We are still getting a few hits, but our APHE shells are completely worthless. Even our AP frag isn't really doing that much. Still a little bit, though. Iceberg Logistics Hub is down to 86%, which, given our range, is decent. It also has so much empty space in it, it can be kind of hard to destroy. Our deck armor is reasonably thick, but I could probably use a little bit of reinforcement in some places so that missiles that come straight down at us don't do that kind of damage. Especially because it provides a way for enemies to get around the very thick belt armor. I say very thick. It's not horribly thick for this large a vehicle, but it's still way sturdier than our deck armor. Our CWIS, while there, could definitely be more effective. I think one of the things is that I need to tune the APN on our medium interceptors. 2 seems to work fine for small interceptors. I think it might need to be a higher value because I don't think that it takes missile acceleration characteristics into account, even though it should. I could be wrong about that. Something to do a little bit more playing with. But I think our medium missile interceptors miss way more than they should, which is part of the reason that we take so much missile damage. We're still getting a fair bit of interceptor damage, but I suspect it could be higher. And that's likely due more to torpedoes. In some of my more recent CWIS builds, I've made sure that they don't shoot at torpedoes because torpedo poppers are really effective. The ones here on the Hullbreacher still do. Okay, I retrofitted this, and I know that I switched this to passive radar, along with in a few other places. Like I added one here, so that we could see active radar missiles from further away, because I realized that passive radar lets you see them way further than these munition warning systems or cameras do, which I think is a little bit of a problem because it makes remote guidance and other forms of missile guidance a little bit too strong comparatively, but is something that should be on this vehicle. I did pick up and put back down some of the turrets, and it must have done something to their angle restrictions. I definitely fixed this deck color as well, so I don't know if I just forgot to save the last revision. I'll have to go and redo a few of my fixes again. Pretty sure I saved it though. And I know I may have retrofit this, then exited the campaign without saving, and then didn't retrofit this again. But at no point, I think, did I not have firing restrictions on this turret, so I'm going to have to figure out what's wrong with that. Now we just have to finish killing this useless lump of metal, because it doesn't really have a purpose anymore, given that you don't have to make ammunition. Alright, that's pretty much all of the western power of the Steel Striders down. Just a few more Liberator cannons to take out after this. Here's an old craft of mine, the Raw, from a previous playthrough. I built this craft a long time ago. It's a box, it has steam engines in it, and it has lasers. Which, of course, due to having lasers, it also has quite powerful lambs, which give it a lot of staying power in a fight. It's, 550,000 materials? 568,000 against the Braveheart, which is significantly cheaper. So as long as it doesn't have too much smoke on it, the Braveheart should get eliminated fairly quickly. Looks like it does have smoke, though. I do not think it's going to get any missiles through. We're also still doing a fair bit of laser damage, although our Alpha Strike is going to be our primary damage dealer now that the smoke is up. With no smoke, I think this fight would have already been over. I was really hoping that our initial strike was going to be way, way more powerful. The Raw can kill... Yeah, it's not getting any damage through to us. The Raw can kill much larger vehicles than this with the Alpha Strike if it gets lucky enough and burns through an important place, regardless of how much smoke they have. I don't know why control caps lock for follow mode always takes me at least 2 button clicks. The first time it just swings the camera around wildly, and then the second time it starts following. We only fire missile interceptors rather than missiles, so that COS must have been firing at a rogue missile interceptor. And there goes the Braveheart. It actually stood up for quite a long time. I did do some benchmarking recently of different AP values for lasers to try to get through smoke, and I couldn't find anything that was even remotely viable. I'm not sure anyone else has any experiences, but the cost of frequency doublers versus the AP that they provide makes them completely just unusable as a method of getting through smoke. Here we have what is presumably the last fight against the Onyx Watch, unless I somehow manage to lose it. We have the Ramses, another very old craft of mine, as well as 2 of the newer Sailfish, and 1 Thundershock, which isn't terribly necessary against the Onyx Watch, but having some energy weapons never really hurts just as a backup to kill runaway craft. And we are hoping to kill the Onyx Throne. Although I've pulled in some other craft, a catapult, and a few trade fleets like the Spear, so we'll see what we actually target. These are remote guided, so whatever they go for is actually the target of the Sailfish. And it looks like the Onyx Throne. I should put one of the Sailfish against the catapult just to make sure it dies, but I'll let the other one do what it wants to. Which, that was not enough to get through the lambs. Looks like that Sea Whiz didn't have anything to keep it occupied, so it came in against the catapult. Oh, it looks like someone's lost their chair. Oh, that's the new mesh for the elevated chair, which I already used to some extent, but I should make sure to always use because an elevated person such as myself requires an elevated chair. This is already not looking so good. The heat and EMP defense of the Onyx Throne, or the Onyx Watch in general, is not really the best. particularly with EMP. To some extent, they have a little bit of heat defense. Looks like we got way too close there. A little bit of heat defense just because they have a bunch of empty chambers, but they also use deck guns just as like their thing. I think this is mostly wood that we lost, although there is some metal in there as well. The light makes it hard for me to tell exactly how big that barrel is. We do have two different gauges on the guns on the side. The high gauge one shoots flak and the small gauge one shoots heat. The Ramses doesn't have a lot of defense other than its bobbiness, which isn't as good against cram cannons as it used to be. I managed to lose the catapult, but its AI dead. Looks like his spear is still up, but it's mostly just the Onyx Throne now. Still moderately healthy, but I think it despawns at a fairly high health. So those are our two sailfish bobbing around in the high seas. They're very, very buoyant, and with Neater's low gravity, it can look a little bit comical. I don't really imagine that we're going to take any particularly severe fire from the spear. It's not like it has any to begin with. Looks like those Hesh missiles. I said Hesh missiles again, it's a force of habit. Last episode you guys learned that I can't read. But those heat missiles retargeted at the last second. Probably the card switching targets. Oh no. They were doing so well too. Oh, they didn't actually collide. They're just going to collide now. It's too late for me to really do much about that.
You're in control. Moving now. Moving now. Moving now. Moving now. Taking command.
That's a huge waste of heat damage. This is why I like to bring way more forces than are necessary against the Onyx Throne, because it can just take time to kill. We have some pretty large damage numbers stacked up in the top right. And oh, I guess it is going to go all the way down. It's already down to 67%. Our flak gun likes the small targets, but that's the wrong button. But regardless, not much damage going to be done by it either way. I do think that flak's absolutely pathetic damage against anything with a moderate armor value still might make it a bit useless, because I usually like my Sea-Wiz to actually work as a secondary weapon if there are no missiles, but it's hard to really get any work done out of flak against factions that aren't the Deepwater Guard or the Steel Strider's air vehicles, which often just don't have any armor on some important components, at least their lighter ones. Although, I am thinking about using it in combination with armor-piercing rounds in a ship that I have, because once you put a hole through the exterior armor, flak can actually do a pretty good job of stripping out internals. Even if it's not actually AP flak, it's just separate flak shells coming in and stripping off everything squishy that's now been exposed. Not sure if it'll work or not, it's just something that I'm trying out. Yeah, good, we're still a fair ways from land. And there we go, that's it for the Onyx Watch. Although it does have to finish despawning first. Speed up that process a little bit. That's a lot of metal. Oh, and a little chunk of heavy armor there. I'm assuming there's an AI in here. Or whatever's in there is already dead and despawned. Heavy armor doesn't protect AIs anymore, and I've been using a lot of EMP. Okay, the fight did not end. We must not have taken out the spear yet. It did a remarkable job of beaching itself. I don't know if I just didn't have land loaded over here or something. Anyway, the oil barons of the Onyx Watch, this isn't capitalized, have long lorded over the vast oil resources of the Cold Loch. Greedily they look down upon the masses from the high walls of their castles, deciding who could have access and who couldn't. Which wasn't me, anyway. With their control now released, the oil fields and its riches are yours to distribute as you see fit. If the other factions didn't know of your presence, they surely do now. Strong reactions, both positive and negative, are to be expected. Well, we know that the other factions are soon to follow. Here we have what is possibly not the most intelligent decision from me, because I have deployed, as the signature piece of this fleet, a vehicle that is predominantly cram cannons against all air vehicles. It is, however, backed up by 2 of the Sailfish, a Darning Needle, and a Thundershock, which will hopefully give it some legs against some of the cheaper craft. Okay, so this is the Ascension. I was aware of its existence, I guess, but I'm not sure I've ever spawned one in before. Oh, I have. I thought these were little sub-vehicles at first, but no, they're drones. I've seen them before. I'm not sure the Ascension has enough firepower for me to really point anything at it and say that, yes, you need to kill this now. Hopefully the elephant will tank a fair bit of damage here. It hasn't fired yet. Oh, it's firing at the Ascension.
Engaging now.
Something is making us run slow here. This isn't a huge fight. Do we have anything that's going to protect us from those cram cannons? Yeah, it looks like the elephant sea whiz took them out. Okay, so I don't think things will go that badly for us. We have some interceptors to take care of their interceptors. I imagine some of the slowdown is, or I say they're interceptors, they're cram bombers. I'm assuming the slowdown... Oh, that AI dead is the Ascension itself. That's not great for them. But I think the slowdown is probably because of these bounding box clashes. I'm sitting a little bit low in the water, but that's how this vehicle always is. Looks like we're backing up to avoid hitting the Sailfish, which is, I suppose, better than actually hitting it. I imagine our heat EMP missiles from the Sailfish are what took out the Ascension. I saw them going for it, but decided to focus on my own craft instead. And it looks like some more have hit this, which... Okay, I thought it was the Great Axe, but I wasn't really sure. So that was pretty fast. I think the heat EMP missiles were really a weak spot for a lot of the enemy vehicles in this fleet. We took 1% damage on the elephant. Its Sea Whiz is actually remarkably effective given the fact that it's 150mm HE, which sounds like just about the worst thing that you could possibly do. We probably didn't have great detection for our craft this submerged at that range, but we managed to get enough hits on it. Looks like the Ascension bombers got released after it despawned, but we had craft capable of hitting them, so they didn't put up that much of a resistance. The Elephant is capable of spotting submerged vehicles, and the Darning Needle drops sonar buoys. I definitely see a lot of important components popping out. I'm kind of worried about the Darning Needle's health because those cram shots could absolutely obliterate it. And almost did at one point from the timed release. Those pellets came very close at one point to just completely shredding the Darning Needle. So, if you noticed for this fight, the Raven's Nest was not a part of it. The Gray Talons decided that they needed to transfer their fleet from one spot to another, and they passed it right by this fleet. And given that the force counts were fairly even, and we're using this surface fleet, which I hadn't had a chance to really use that much, I thought it was a good time to get us into a fight with them. Well, I believe that's enough From the Depths for one day. I hope you all enjoyed watching, and I hope to see you in the future.